So how does Vue help us solve such pass-through problems? First of all, it's really important to understand that this is not necessarily a problem and not bad. You can do it the way we're doing it here. But to save writing that extra code, you can also get rid of, let's say, the props here. Let's start with topics. You can get rid of that here. Get rid of it here on knowledge grid. And for the moment, just keep that emitted event. And then pass the topics to knowledge grid in a different way. Because we need the topics there, and we definitely also need to manage them in app.vue, since app.vue is the place where active element, which needs to know about the topics, and knowledge base, and therefore ultimately knowledge grid, are connected. So how can we pass the topics to knowledge grid, which needs the topics, if we don't want to pass them through knowledge base? Well, first of all, let's remove them here, and let's explore another feature Vue offers us, and that is provide and inject. A pattern you can use to provide data in one place and inject it, which means use it, in another place. Now here in app.vue, we could, for example, provide our topics here. We do this by adding a provide option to our config object. Anywhere in the config object. Here I'm adding it between data and methods. And provide can hold an object then in which you, for example, provide your topics. So here I could then grab this topics array and provide it down there. So now I'm providing this topics array. Now this is step one. Now we're providing this data. And that uses an internal mechanism built into Vue. But providing is only half of the story. We also need to listen to that provided data. We need to use that provided data somewhere. And that, in our case, would take place in the knowledge grid, because that is where we need the topics. For that here, rather than expecting to get topics as props, we add another option, the inject option, which works together with provide. Inject basically works like props. You provide an array, and now you reference all the provided data you want to use in this component. So at the moment, there's just one piece of data we are providing, and that would be topics. We're providing that in app.vue under the key topics here. So we can use that key and inject it here in knowledge grid. And here's one important note. You can only inject what has been provided on a higher up level, which basically means in a parent component or an ancestor component of knowledge grid. So we can inject topics here because it is provided in app.vue, and app.vue ultimately is above knowledge grid, right? app.vue is a parent to knowledge base, and knowledge base is a parent to knowledge grid, and therefore knowledge grid also is below app.vue. If we, for example, provided something in active element, we could not inject it in knowledge grid. Why? Because active element is a neighbor of knowledge base, and knowledge base then contains knowledge grid, and therefore ultimately active element is a neighbor to knowledge grid. And this will not work. Provide and inject needs this parent-child relation. So you can't provide and inject between neighbors. But here it will work because we are providing an app.vue, and that is an ancestor of knowledge grid. So it is above knowledge grid. And therefore now if I save this, you will see that everything still works as before. But now data is ending up differently in knowledge grid, and we're avoiding this passing through of topics in knowledge base, which is definitely an improvement here. However, there is a problem. We're now basically creating this array twice. We have it here in app.vue in our data, and we then have it again in the provide object. This works in this case, but it is code duplication. And if we had any logic in this app to change this data stored array, This change would not be reflected in the provided data because that is a brand new array. It's a brand new object in memory, therefore. So if we ever change this original array here in data, such changes would not be passed on to components that rely on the provided topics. So therefore, it would be nicer if we could provide our data here so that eventual changes are picked up. And it turns out we can do that. For that, we need to change the way we use provide, though. Instead of setting it equal to an object with the provided data, we now convert provide to a method. So now the provide option holds a function in the end. And in there, we return our provided object. So it now basically works a little bit like data. And in here, we can still set up any keys of our choice. So I'll stick to topics here. But now we can use the this keyword to reach out to our instance-specific data. So with this topics, I now reach out to topics which we manage in our data. And I'm using this to provide it under a topics key to any potential child components. Of course, this key you're using here doesn't have to be the same one you're using in data. It is in this case, but it doesn't have to be. If I now save this, it still works, but now we are working on one and the same object in memory. Now let's simulate that topics changes here in our data to verify whether this really works. For this, I'm going to add the mounted lifecycle hook here. And in there, I'll set a timer to, let's say, 3 seconds. And after those 3 seconds, in this arrow function, which is just a different way of defining a function in JavaScript, I will reach out to this topics and push a new topic to that array. That topic will have an ID of events, let's say, and then a title of events as well. A description text of events are important in Vue, and then a full text of events allow you to trigger code on demand, something like that. So I'm having the same structure here as in all the topics we have initially, but now that topic down there is only getting added 3 seconds after the Vue app has been rendered to the screen. Now let's save that and let's see if our list here updates after 3 seconds. And it does, and we can use events just like the other pieces of data we got here. So this proves that provide inject works. Now that is provide and inject, a very helpful pattern if you want to avoid pass-through components and passing through props unnecessarily. The question now, of course, is whether it can also help us with custom events, because we're also funneling our custom events through a couple of components.